Good evening, everyone. I'm so gratified to see so many of you to come out for this very important topic. I think you are going to find your time will not be wasted. So we'll get started. Our first speaker is Dr. David Hart. He is a clinical mental health counselor with nearly 15 years of experience working with people with dementia and their families. Dr. Hart was formerly the Director of Education at Alzheimer's Family Services Center, a state-of-the-art adult day healthcare center affiliated with Hoag Hospital's Neurosciences Institute. Currently, Dr. Hart is the Director of Clinical Services at Always Best Care Senior Services and a faculty member in the College of Health and Human Services at California State University, Fullerton. Dr. Hart is the founding chair of the South Bay Dementia Education Consortium. He has authored several book chapters and journal articles and has presented at national and international conferences. I've already heard him talk a little bit. I think you guys are going to be blown away by his insights. So let's welcome Dr. Hart.
Okay, can you hear me? Good evening. Welcome. This is a big crowd. What does that tell you about the topic? Yeah. It's a topic that people are interested in, right? And I can probably guess why you're here. You're forgetting what you're doing in rooms, right? You're walking into a room, forgetting what you're doing there. So I just wanted to briefly say that, yes, I'm a faculty member in the Department of Counseling at Cal State Fullerton. I have a PhD in counseling. I've been a practicing psychotherapist for nearly 15 years. I specialize in working with older adults generally, but with patients who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's and other dementias specifically, and their families. I am here, though, primarily as a former caregiver. And I just wanted to honor my caregiving experience. How many of you here in this room are caring for somebody who's living with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia? Put your hands up if you're willing to do so. Thank you so much for being here. I know that it's not easy to find somebody to support you as you come out into the community to access resources. And I just want to say bravo. Thank you for all of the work that you do to support your loved one. And I just want to say that my grandmother, caring for her name's Janice, by the way. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease when I was 15, and my mom and I cared for her together for 8 years. She died when I was 22. I was just graduating from college. And I have to tell you, from 15 to 22, those are pretty formative years, wouldn't you say? This was the most challenging experience of my life, but it was also the most honorable. It was a great honor for me to be able to do this. But I knew then that it was really an uphill climb. And my joy tonight, and how many of you read my article in the Daily Breeze? Any of you read my article on happiness? Well, I talked a little bit about happiness and how to cultivate it from the outside in, and one of the exercises that I encourage based on research is to exercise a signature strength. And one of the things that I find so meaningful is to be here with you to share this information, hoping that your experience will be a little bit smoother than mine, so that you have the best information, so that you can make the best decisions. How does that sound? Sound good? Okay, so that's where we're going to start. And let's jump into why you're here. So yes, we all experience cognitive changes as we age. This is normal. Your body is experiencing changes too, yeah? Yeah, you're not able to do the same things that you used to be able to do, and the brain experiences similar challenges. So yes, longer to process new information, more effort to learn and store information, and believe it or not, we have a greater susceptibility to distraction. We used to be able to maybe multitask more easily, but as we age, that becomes more of a challenge. Delay in recalling information, and I know you all experience this. And so let me just get a sense. And if you feel comfortable, raise your hand. How many of you in this room have a difficult time remembering people's names. Now I want you to raise your hands up. Now look around. Look around. Looks pretty normal, yeah? Okay. How many of you sometimes forget where you parked your car in the parking structure? Yeah? Take a look around. And the question that I asked earlier, how many of you sometimes walk into a room and forget what you're doing there? Yeah? Okay, so that's pretty normal. We all experience that. So let me show you a nifty graph here. Oh, I actually have a clicker that would make life a lot easier. Yeah. So you see this top green line here? Well, let's look at the graph. Here we have cognitive decline over time. Yeah. So we all are experiencing this green bar here is what we call age-related cognitive decline. All of us are experiencing, it's pretty normal. Okay, there we are. And here we have, and we're not going to talk too much about MCI today, we're going to talk mostly about Alzheimer's disease, right? So we're all experiencing this cognitive decline, but then sometimes it becomes abnormal, right? It becomes abnormal. It's outside of what we would expect for normal agers. So how do we differentiate between what is normal and what is abnormal? Okay? If I park my car in front of Nordstrom, and I go into the mall and I shop, and I look for my car at JCPenney, that's not normal. Okay? If I fail to recall the name of an acquaintance that I've encountered a handful of times in the past year, normal. If I fail to recall the name of a friend that I've known for 20 years, not normal. Okay. If I walk into a room and I forget what I'm doing there, normal. But if I walk into a room and I get lost in that space, not normal. So it's really important for those of you, because I know I get the question all the time. Older adults come to my workshops and they're afraid, right? They're afraid that their memory loss is going to eventually turn into something abnormal, or their memory challenges will turn into memory loss. And so you need to know how to differentiate between what's pretty normal and what's not, okay? So let's take a look at what is dementia. What is dementia? Well, I addressed this in the first column that I wrote a couple weeks ago in the Daily Breeze. Okay. Dementia is what we describe as a clinical syndrome. And I just want you to know I'm not a medical doctor. I have a PhD in counseling. So I'm giving you information based on my clinical specialization and research. I'm an academic, not a medical doctor, but I'm giving you up-to-date information. So it's a clinical syndrome, and in order to be described as having dementia, the patient has to exhibit what primary symptom? Memory loss. Yeah, that's the primary symptom, okay? So in addition to having memory loss, the patient also has to have an impairment of cognition. And cognition, the primary cognition that we're thinking about here is language, orientation to time and place, visual spatial orientation, judgment, insight, planning, structuring, etc. So those two impairments need to be pretty obvious. They need to be observable. And the cognitive impairment and memory impairment needs to interrupt the patient's activities of daily living. In other words, they're no longer able to do what they once were able to. Okay? And so for my grandmother, and I'm going to use her as sort of my muse tonight, what did I start to notice? I started to notice that her checkbook wasn't organized anymore. So her ability to mathematically compute numbers was impaired. When the cat got out of the house, she called 911. Okay? Her judgment was impaired. She was purchasing, I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of subscriptions, magazine subscriptions through Publishers Clearinghouse. We still, to this day, she died almost 20 years ago, we still get Rogue magazines coming to the house, okay? So we noticed this impairment. So that was the cognitive impairment. Where was the memory impairment? Well, I would go into her home, and what did I notice on the stove? Burnt pots and pans, right? Radically burnt. So those two impairments, memory and cognition, they were interrupting her ability to do what she's always been able to do. So that is the definition. That's the clinical definition of dementia. But the bigger question, the question that needs to be asked and hopefully answered, because it's a harder answer to come by, is what's causing the dementia. The dementia is the observable symptoms, but then we got to find out what the physiological cause is, okay? So are you ready for it? Now, everybody, when you walk out of here, this is the information that you must know. Otherwise, I'll feel like I have failed you, okay? Are you ready? I'm not going to ask you to remember it, because I know that that would just be foolish, yeah? Okay, so I'm going to ask you to write it down if you want. You've got something to write with? Okay. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. Okay? Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. It represents about 55 to 75% of the entire pie of dementia. So that's why you hear those two words interchanged so much, so frequently, because Alzheimer's is the most common cause. So you can think about dementia like an umbrella term. There are many different causes or types of dementia. Alzheimer's is the most common, but there's also dementia with Lewy body, frontotemporal dementia, dementia related to traumatic brain injury, dementia related to all sorts of things, HIV, etc. Okay? So here's a nifty graphic that might help you to see this. Okay, there's the dementia. That's the umbrella. And then you have irreversible types of dementia and potentially reversible types. Okay? 85 to 95% of all dementias are irreversible. They're chronic, they're insidious, they're pervasive. But here's really important information for you. If you are experiencing memory challenges, and we know this because the research demonstrates this, if you're complaining about your memory frequently, you need to go talk to your doctor about it. If somebody is telling you, somebody that you trust, that your memory is lapsing, you need to go and talk to your doctor about it. And most of you, no, not most of you, I'm imagining that some of you don't want to talk to your doctor because you don't want to hear bad news, right? And we know this, that for older adults 55 plus, Alzheimer's disease is the most feared disease. It's more feared than any other. Can you imagine why? You know why, right? None of us want to lose our independence. None of us want to lose our capacity to make our own decisions. So, but here's the sticking point. If by chance you had a potentially reversible type of dementia, wouldn't you want to know? Oh, yes, I hear. Oh, yes, up here. Yes, of course you would, because it could be that the symptoms that you are experiencing and exhibiting may be related to another physiological issue that can be treated, like a medication side effect, a metabolic issue, a urinary tract infection. And this is a big one, folks, depression. Depression for older adults often is exhibited as confusion, disorientation, and the inability to focus attention. Is this making sense to you? So you want to talk to your doctor about it, and we're going to go through what a thorough diagnostic evaluation looks like. But really, I'm encouraging you, if you're experiencing memory challenges, talk to your physician. If you don't have a physician that you trust, talk to somebody here at the hospital. I'm sure they have access to lots of physicians, right? Yeah. Or call somebody like me or anybody else at the back tables that can help you. Okay, here you see the pie. We're not going to talk about a lot of the other dementias today. I'm going to focus on Alzheimer's disease because it's the most common type and I don't have a lot of time. But we have a presentation coming up October the 23rd. There's flyers back there through the South Bay Dementia Education Consortium. Dr. Mario Mendez is coming down to Redondo Beach. It's a free program. He'll be speaking specifically to all the other dementias. So if you can make it, it's 6 to 7:30, Redondo Beach Public Library, October 23rd. There's flyers in the back. Okay, so let's talk very briefly about numbers. 5.7 million Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's disease. Age, yes, is the #1 risk factor. So the older that we get, the more risk we accrue. Okay, the numbers are somewhat scary. 62 and above, about 13% of that population has some form of dementia. Once you hit 74, it's about 25 to 30%, depending on what stats you read. Once you hit 80, 82, we're looking at about 40%. Okay? So I don't say that to scare you, and we don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but as an epidemiologist, we're curious, and we're wanting to know more about the 60% that never develop dementia. And so there's a lot of information in our community partners and my agency. We go out into the community and talk about what people can do to potentially lower their risk for developing dementia. Can you imagine what those things are? What do you think the primary is? Exercise, yep. And what do you think the second is? Diet. And what do you think the third is? Sleep? Yeah. It's social connectivity, and the fourth is what Charmon's going to be talking about later in terms of brain activity, okay? So the scary thing is, folks, 2050, we're expecting about 16 to 18 million Americans living with Alzheimer's. The fastest growing population in the US is 85 plus. Right? So it's becoming a big problem. But some of the science that I've read recently suggests, and this is all correlational evidence, right? But it suggests that we could cut that 16 million in about a third if we could inspire people to adopt specific strategies that may lower their risk, like the 4 that I just addressed. Okay, we're not going to talk so much. Well, one thing I will say, diabetics, 80 to 90% more likely to develop dementia. Obese patients, depending on the survey data that you read, 75 to 85, 90% more likely to develop dementia. Patients with cardiovascular disease, 2.5 to 3 times more likely to develop dementia. Do you see where I'm going here? Yeah. Lifestyle matters, but age does too. Okay, so caregivers, Vicky's going to talk about that, so I'm not going to go too much into it. What do you notice here? Do you recognize some of these faces? Yeah? Who do you recognize? Just shout out some names. Charles Bronson. Oh my gosh, my hearing's horrible. Well, you recognize these faces. They've all been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And so what you need to know is I work with Alzheimer's patients every day, and they're brilliant people. They're warm people. They're people with fantastic life stories. They're people that came from nothing and built lives around their talents, their gifts. They're wonderful, amazing people. And I'm encouraging you and inviting you to always see past the diagnosis, to always see the person behind the disease. I really encourage you. I know it's hard to do sometimes, particularly when we're exhausted as caregivers. But these people, they have stories. They have meaning. This is Dr. Alzheimer here on the left, and the first patient diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease on the right. Her name was Augusta Dieter. Augusta Dieter was brought to see Dr. Alzheimer in 1906 by her husband, who was observing peculiar behaviors. But what was he noticing primarily? Memory loss. That's right. But at the time, he thought that she may have schizophrenia, and so Dr. Alzheimer admitted her to his hospital, his unit in the hospital, and observed her for a period of 2 years. And what he noticed was the complete decomposition of the brain and of memory totally. So here, you know, the brain is a fascinating organ. It's the pinnacle of evolution, right? Every breath that we take, about 60% of the oxygen in that breath goes to fuel the billions of cells in your brain and the trillions of synaptic connections. Your brain weighs about 3 pounds. And you can see that 3-pound healthy brain there on the left. An Alzheimer's brain at autopsy after the progression of the disease, about 1 pound. It loses 2/3 of its mass over time. Here you can see brain tissue affected by Alzheimer's disease. You can see the beta amyloid plaques, which is the splotchy-like figures there, and the neurofibrillary tau tangles that are the spot-like, like stripe-like places on this slide. Here's the deal. I get asked this question frequently, and I go to conferences around the country, here at home as well, learning as much as I can about Alzheimer's disease. And if you talk to researchers in the field, right, we still don't know what causes the abnormal buildup of amyloid plaque in the brain. We still don't know what causes that. We can describe the disease, we can evaluate and assess for the disease. We're having a difficult time treating the disease, but at the end of the day, we still don't know what causes it. And so for the past 20 or 30 years, scientists have been working from a hypothesis called the amyloid cascade. So that the point being, the more beta amyloid we have in the brain, the more Alzheimer's disease that we have. What we know and what's been published frequently in phase 2 of clinical trial is there is a vaccine that completely eradicates the plaque from the brain. It's in phase 2 clinical trial. Promising results. But what's happened is the plaque buildup has negatively impacted the structure of the brain. So you still have the structural damage. The preliminary results suggest that for phase 2, which is not, we can't generalize the information yet, but phase 2 of clinical trial, they had about a 30% increase in memory scores for patients in the early stages. So some news to be sort of, you know, not, how do I say this, cautiously optimistic about. Cautiously optimistic. Okay, so if it's not just memory anymore, I've given you some indicators to look for with Alzheimer's. Has problems doing familiar things, frequent problems with complicated tasks, forgetting things more often, such as job skills, forgets common words, is confused about where they are, what time it is, what day it is, has a sudden change in mood, that's sometimes very present, loses interest in doing familiar things, things that they once enjoyed, etc. So these are, what's the word that I want to use here? Symptoms to be, yes, that was my memory lapse today. I'll probably have a few more. I'll probably have a few more. Okay, I don't have much time because I'm looking. I have about 10 minutes, but I want to give you a very quick lesson on the brain and how it moves across 3 stages of Alzheimer's. Okay. So I want you to look at my fist here. Can you see it? Okay. So my fingers here, I want you to see that as what we call the top brain, up here, the cerebral cortex. My thumb, I want you to think of that as the limbic system or the middle brain. Okay. And my wrist is going to be the hindbrain or the reptilian brain. Okay. The top brain, we're going to focus on that first. The top brain is the part of the brain that makes us uniquely human and compared to all the other animal species on the planet. By the way, this is very elementary here, so I'm not giving a neurosciences class, just a way to help you understand. So this top brain is what makes us uniquely human. What makes us human in comparison to all the other animal species on the planet? Thinking, communication, strategy. Yes. Hey, Reggie. So here, yes, That's what it is. It's our ability to communicate, to have language. We don't have to recreate the wheel each and every generation. But we also have logic and reasoning and planning and strategizing and all of that. That's the first part of the brain in the early stages to be impaired in Alzheimer's. The reasoning, the logic, the insight, the self-awareness, the thinking about thinking, the ability to find appropriate words to describe their experiences. Okay. That's early stage. Now we're going to move into the middle stage here, okay, which is the midbrain, or what we call the limbic system. The midbrain is the part of the brain that makes us uniquely mammals. Now, go back to junior high science. I'm testing your memory here, okay? What makes us uniquely mammals? Well, crickets, chirp, chirp. Yeah, it's that we have live birth, right? We lactate and feed our young through mammary glands. But we also have feelings, and we can be conditioned through experience. Okay? Do you know what your 5 primary feelings are? How many of you have pets? Yeah? Can you tell when your pet is angry? Can you tell when your pet is afraid? Can you tell when your pet has joy, is happy? Can you tell when your pet is disgusted? Yeah? And can you tell when your pet is sad? Those are the 5 primary feelings that we all exhibit. We also have a fight or flight response, yes? Okay. So all of that is housed right here in the limbic system. Our primary feelings, our fight or flight response, and any experiential memories that are positive, really supercharged, positively charged memories like Christmas times and weddings and experiences that we had when we were kids. And also our traumatic memories are stored there as well, because those memories help us to do more things that we find pleasure in and stay away from things that we are afraid of. Okay. In the middle stage of the disease, guess what's happening, folks? Okay. When I'm out on the road and somebody cuts me off, I get really mad. Anger flares up. And it sends a message out to yell and scream and maybe, tell that person, give that person a piece of my mind, right? And so my middle brain is broadcasting feeling up to my top brain. But my top logical brain, my reasonable brain, my planning brain, you know what it tells my feeling brain? Don't do it. Don't do it, because that guy might be bigger than you, or that guy might have a gun, or heaven forbid, that guy might be a client or a patient, right? So I stop myself, because my top brain, that's its purpose. Its purpose is to filter feelings. That's what makes us human. And that part of the brain, it starts to disintegrate as the disease progresses. So what do we get in the middle stage of the disease? We get unfiltered feelings. And so we have to learn how to communicate differently, not logically, not reasonably, but from a feeling perspective. Feeling to feeling, heart to heart. And that, I'm encouraging you to come to one of my workshops on the 3rd Saturday of the month to learn more about that. But that's where we're going to stop. By the way, my wrist here, the reptilian brain, that's the part of the brain responsible for automatic functions, right? People ask me all the time, how do Alzheimer's patients die? Right? Well, it's often from pneumonia. Why? Because they have a difficult time swallowing, right? And they start to aspirate. Right? So that's an automatic function. We take it for granted. Our ability, you put something in our mouth and we swallow. Okay. You'll have to read through this on your own because I need to move forward. Reasons for early identification. It's important to get for early identification primarily so that you can rule out some of those potentially reversible types of dementia. But for those of you who may be diagnosed with Alzheimer's type or any other type, it's important. I work with early stage patients. I was with a group of about 20 today. And what they're wanting to do with their life right now is to make decisions and to live with more purpose and to live with more meaning and to enjoy the life that they still have left to live. So it's important from an existential perspective to know so that we can make appropriate decisions. For you to also be aware of, the components of a memory evaluation include all of this. It's not just an assessment, a 5 or 10 minute assessment using the mini mental or the slums that gives you a score, right? Because all the score is telling you is that you have symptoms related to that look like dementia, but it doesn't help you to understand what's causing it. So be sure that if you want a thorough diagnostic evaluation, you talk to your physician or your neurologist about these components. Okay, I have about 5 minutes, correct?
We didn't get started with the talking right away, so I would definitely tell you, I would take
10 minutes? Okay. 10 minutes, we're good. We're going to keep going here. Medication. So how do we treat Alzheimer's? Okay. Here I'm going to show you a graph that may help you to understand. Okay. So over here we have functional ability, so the person's ability to do activities of daily living, okay, like get dressed, brush teeth, make a sandwich, things like that. Okay. And the amount of time. So functional ability, loss of functional ability over time. This red line here is the natural progression of Alzheimer's disease. And I will tell you that this is somewhat misleading because in my clinical experience, it never really looks like this. Doesn't look like that, generally. It can, but I rarely see that. It more looks like steps, gradual steps. So you plateau, patients plateau, and then they have a drop that's generally related to some sort of change either in the pathology or potentially a medication issue, the flu, a urinary tract infection. Dehydration is a big one for you to be aware of, okay? So that's the natural progression. The medications that we have now provide a symptomatic benefit. It's what we call a symptomatic bump, okay? They're looking for something that's going to slow the progression. You see, it changes the direction, the trajectory completely. We're not there yet. And then maintaining function, definitely not there yet, and hopefully someday a cure. So right now what we have is this symptomatic bump. It's still declining over time, but functional ability improves. Here's the best way for you to understand this, okay, how I've been taught to understand it. It's like when you get the flu. When you get the flu, what do? Do you take a medication, generally? Yes. So when you have the flu, what do you have? A high fever, running stuffy nose, runny nose, sore throat, body aches, yeah? Those are the symptoms. You take a Theraflu or whatever it is that you take, do the symptoms subside? Generally, yes, we would expect that they would. But after 6 hours, what happens? The symptoms come back, right? Does it change the fact that you have the flu? No. And so what I want you to hear when you walk out of here, it's really important for you, for me, that you hear this, that the current medications do not slow the disease down. They only provide a symptomatic bump. The medications do not affect the pathology of Alzheimer's disease or other dementias. They affect other systems that are impacted by the pathology. So let me show you what I mean. So here, many of you, are you familiar with the medication Aricept? Yes. Are you familiar with the medication Exelon? Yes, okay. So Exelon and Aricept, those are acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. Acetylcholinesterase is a neurotransmitter. It's part of the chemical makeup of your brain. And Alzheimer's patients tend to have too much of it. And this neurotransmitter is part of the memory system. And so what it does is it stops the brain from making more of it, right? So it helps to regulate the buildup of acetylcholinesterase, which then can help patients to have better attention. Remember, focus and attention are really the foundation of memory, the ability to focus or register information. So it helps with that, it helps with concentration. I will tell you that there are some significant side effects for some patients. Then you have memantine or Namenda. It regulates a different neurotransmitter system called glutamate. Okay. So it's not addressing the pathology, it's addressing systems that are impacted by the pathology. The research indicates that the data suggests that memory and functional scores do improve for most patients. Sometimes the side effects, though, are too much to bear. Sometimes the cost of the medication is too much to bear. But you should always talk to your doctor about the medications that you're on or treatment options available to you. Okay, I'm going to talk to you caregivers for a moment. I'm going to demonstrate a project, an intervention. I bring my teddy bear everywhere I go, okay? So I'm going to sit him here for a second. So your challenge as a care partner is to manage your loved one's confusion. It's the most effective strategy, one of the most effective strategies for having quality of life. Okay. Let me give you an example. It's Friday afternoon. You're driving down the 405 in rush hour. It's 5:30. It's a heat wave. It's about 102. Okay. You've got your 3 grandkids in the back seat. They're 3, 4, and 5. Your radio is broken, and rather than it be broken off, it's broken on. And sadly, your air condition has busted. Okay? So let me just ask you, how might you be feeling in that moment? Stressed, overwhelmed, frustrated? Okay, and so because you have your top brain still intact, what are you going to do with that top brain of yours? You're probably going to make a plan, right? You're going to make a plan to get out of that stressful situation. Alzheimer's patients, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to scream. They're going to scream and they're going to act out and they're going to let you know that they're stressed out because they don't have the language to tell you maybe, and they don't have the capacity to fix it. So your job as a care partner to serve as your loved one's top brain by managing their confusion. The most effective way to do that, drum roll, it really is routine. Routine is the most effective strategy for managing confusion. I worked, as Dr. Miller suggested, I was at Alzheimer's Family Services Center for 4 years as their director of education. We worked with about 90 to 100 demented patients every day. And they had muscle memory around lunchtime. They had muscle memory around bingo time. They had muscle memory around, when the buses would come to pick them up. So we want to establish and reinforce muscle memory. So there are some emotional needs related to confusion as well. Here you see the process, the feedback loop. Confusion equals discomfort, discomfort equals the behavior. If you want to avoid the behavior, you avoid the confusion. Yes, are we following? Okay. So some of the emotional needs related to confusion, the psychological needs, are related to safety and security. Remember I told you about this midbrain is all about fight or flight. So am I going to fight you or am I going to run? But all of that has to do with, do I feel safe? And so what we wanted to do, and Alzheimer's Family Services Center was a subsidiary of Hoag Neurosciences Institute. And we received a $250,000 grant to see if we could take behavioral strategies that we used in adult daycare and implement them on the hospital level. So what we were trying to do is manage some of the behaviors in the hospital so that they didn't have to restrain them physically or pharmacologically. So we picked 4 tools. We picked a teddy bear. By the way, this was a project that was supervised and coordinated by my dear friend and mentor, Dr. Cordula Dick-Mielke. She's amazing if any of you know of her. She's taught me everything I know. I'm so blessed to have learned all of this from her. So we've got teddy bear, stress ball, folding towel, and music. Okay, music. Because remember, music, all the good memories are stored here, yeah? Music gets connected to that pretty quickly. So what do we do? Well, we taught our nurses a very similar training that you're receiving now. And then we went through 4 steps of redirection. These steps are really important. You can't skip one. You got to do them in order. And most of us as care partners, we forget the first and most important, which is validating. Then we join, then we distract, and then we redirect. Most of us go to distraction and redirection before the other 2. So let me give you an example. So Mrs. Jones is in the hospital for a fractured hip. She's in the hospital and she's wanting to get out of her bed, but she can't walk. And she swears that she sees her deceased husband in the hallway. Husband has been deceased for 2 years. She's wanting to get out of the bed to find her husband. What does that tell you about how she's feeling? She's feeling scared. She's feeling unsafe, right? And so the nurses are trying to reassure her. So we taught the nurses this strategy here. First, validate Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones, you look sad. Mrs. Jones, you look worried. Mrs. Jones, it looks like you want to get out of bed. Mrs. Jones, it looks like you're really frustrated. Whatever it is, it's a validation first, because you were validating, not trying to reorient, not trying to make sense. We're trying to connect at the level of the human spirit. Next thing, we're going to join. So how do we join her? What does she want? She wants to find her husband? Well, we want to find him too. Just so happens, Mrs. Jones, I'm looking for your husband too. Because if I tell Mrs. Jones in that moment that her husband is deceased, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think she's going to try to get out of bed more? Probably. So we don't want that. So you're looking for your husband, I'm looking for him too. What do you think is going to happen when I say that to her? Do you think it's going to help to maybe calm her down? Yeah. Now I'm going to distract her with Teddy. Well, guess what? Teddy, for kids, teddy bears serve as what? Security. They're transitional objects. And I'm hoping that when she touches Teddy, that she's going to have a surge of dopamine, and she's going to experience pleasure, and she's going to experience safety. We're hoping that that's the case. So now I've distracted her, and hopefully the Alzheimer's disease will work to my advantage, and she's going to forget that she's looking for her husband. Okay? What do you think? So that's Teddy. Excuse me for a moment. This must look amazing on video. Folding towels, you can use anything. Cutting coupons, organizing drawers, folding laundry, whatever you think might work best to keep your loved one occupied. Remember, this helps to manage confusion. Why? Because if they're doing nothing, they're wondering what? What should I be doing? Give them something to do, something that they can feel successful at doing. Stress balls, this is so important, right? When you're trying to insert an IV, if you're trying to wipe a behind, don't let their hands be everywhere. We don't even do that with young babies, right? We give babies something to hold on to. So give them something to hold on to. And of course, play positive music, music that they love. We had Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday, etc. And I was just talking to my colleague Mark about a client who I had recently, very agitated, very aggressive. I found out that she loved the Beatles. We popped on Hey Jude, and we sang it together. And it was one of the only Beatles songs that I remembered. But I recalled it, sang it with her, and her agitation came way down. Okay. What do you think happened at the hospital? We piloted this project on 3 floors of the hospital. What do you think happened? Do you think that we limited the use of restraints? We did, by 60%, 60, right? So it worked a little bit over half the time. And the hospital was so pleased with our efforts that they implemented memory care tools on every floor of the hospital that worked with older adults who may be demented. Okay, so I am literally so out of time. But I want you to know, caregivers, don't forget about yourselves. All of this information, I do the 3rd Saturday most of the time of every month. It's called Caregiving Essentials. I spend 4 hours on this information. So come, it's free, and there are plenty of flyers back there with my colleague Mark, okay? I'm sorry that I don't have more time, but I will tell you this. You can read about this at your leisure. You can come to visit with me later. What else can you do? You can call me, you can email me, you can reach out, and there are a ton of great community partners in the back too. So, let me ask you, did you learn something tonight? Raise your hand if you learned something tonight. Okay. Raise your hand if you can use what you learned tonight. Okay. And did you have a little bit of fun? Yeah? Okay. Well, it's been my pleasure. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everything. You know, I tend to be a little verbose, but come see me if you like. Thank you so much. Oh, by the way, thank you, Torrance Memorial. Thank you to the committee. Thank you, Dr. Miller. Thank you for everybody inviting me to do this. It's been such a great, great, great pleasure. Thank you.
I knew that he wasn't going to disappoint. So we're going to have our next speaker now, Vicki Hirschberger. Excuse me. Vicki is a wellness educator with a master's degree in clinical holistic health education and is a certified professional interactive imagery guide. Along with her private counseling or consulting practice, she created and coordinates the Health and Healing Program for Torrance Memorial Medical Center. It focuses on integrating complementary medicine with traditional Western medicine and includes classes in yoga, tai chi, senior fitness, meditation, guided imagery, and stress management. It also includes a therapeutic bodywork program. Her passion is helping people find tools for self-care and realize the importance of using them. Her role as a caregiver to her mother, who suffered a massive stroke, and her 105-year-old grandmother for the past 18 years has caused her focus to shift to creating resources for caregivers. She facilitates a caregiver support group, helping to remove some of what overwhelms and isolates caregivers. She also adapted her BEAT stress class, which she presented to corporations and nonprofits to focus on the needs of caregivers. By giving them tools to de-stress their body, environment, attitude, and thoughts, her goal is to help caregivers realize that caring for themselves is as important as caring for their loved one. Please welcome Vicki Hirschberger.
Okay, so 3 days after my mother's 71st birthday, she suffered a massive stroke. Her life changed in an instant, and so did mine, because I chose to become her caregiver for what I thought would be a couple of years. It has stretched into 18, and she and my 105-year-old grandmother are still going strong. In those 18 years, I have done caregiving from a distance, in-home, board and care, skilled nursing facility, and assisted living. And every step of that journey, I have learned a lot. If you have a diagnosis of dementia, the counterpart to that is there will be a caregiver. And finding out who that caregiver is going to be, who is best going to serve you when you can no longer make decisions for yourself, is very important. I could stand up here and talk about caregiving for 3 or 4 days. I have a very limited amount of time, so I basically have 2 goals. The first one is to convince those of you who will be caregivers that caring for yourself is as important as caring for your loved one. And the second is to let you know as many resources as I can so that you realize there is an immense amount of support for you out here. Because caregivers tend to isolate and not understand that there are things to help them. So I'm going to start with Torrance Memorial Resources. I was incredibly blessed when I got my job at Torrance Memorial. Let's see if we can get to, there we go. to meet a woman named Charmone LaRose, who's sharing this stage with me. Charmone had created a series of classes that she called the Caregiver Training. And what she would do is she would bring in community organizations in this class to help the caregiver see what was available in the community. We've taken that class and we've turned it into Caregiver Training 1, Caregiver Training 2, and Caring for Someone with Dementia. Caregiver Training 1 and 2 both include dementia, but the one for dementia focuses completely on that because we found that so many of our people, that was the issue they were dealing with. So Caregiver Training 1 is going to happen this September. It's going to be on Monday nights, September 24th through October 29th from 6:15 to 8:45. And again, what she does is she brings the community resources to you so you can meet the people, you can talk to them, you can discuss with them what your fears are, how they can ask them how they can help you. So it's a very powerful class from that, and you'll learn a lot of things that you may not have even thought of as a caregiver that you're going to need to know. Caregiver Training 2 will be offered in January and February. Caring for Someone with Dementia will be offered next spring. Hopefully you're all Advantage members, so if you get our newsletter, the dates and times will be listed in that. In addition, because in the caregiver training, the other thing that happens is you meet other caregivers. And so you get to hear a little bit about what's going on with them. And a lot of bonds are formed in that class. But in addition to that, we have a caregiver support group. It meets every Tuesday night from 6:30 to 8 in the West Tower on the 5th floor in room H. I facilitate that class and that group, it's not a class. And I strongly recommend that you come to it because you are going to meet other caregivers, you're going to hear their stories, sometimes we laugh a lot, sometimes we cry. But you're going to realize that you are not alone and that other people are going through this. And I'm amazed at how many times a person who comes in with an issue and starts talking about the problem, there's somebody sitting in that room who had the same issue who found out how to be helped with it. So it's wonderful from that standpoint. And if you come to the group, the first thing I'm going to give you is this folder. And Charmone and I and a group of people spent many, many months putting this together. It is a folder that has resources for people with Alzheimer's and memory loss on this side, and resources for the caregiver on this side. You got in your handout tonight the resources for Alzheimer's and memory loss, but in this folder we have a lot of other brochures and references to other organizations. And then this side for the caregiver has tons and tons of resources for you. If you can't come to the support group, then you can go to HealthLinks and we will give you one. HealthLinks is our resource center in the West Tower on the 1st floor. Just request this, it's free, they'll give it to you. At the top of your page in the handouts, it also has, you can call 310-517-4711 or email healthlinks@tmmc.com and say, I would like the folder for caregivers and Alzheimer's and memory loss, and we will send it to you. It has a lot of valuable information. So what are some of the things you're going to have to put together? Well, one of the things is, I forgot. David also has a support group, meets the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays, correct, of the month, and that is aimed specifically at Alzheimer's and dementia groups, okay? And he mentioned his Essential Caregivers thing that meets the 3rd Saturday of the month. I send everybody who comes to my support group with dementia as their issue to that class because he does for 4 hours what he tried to give to you tonight in 45 minutes. So it's very in-depth. I thought I knew a lot about dementia, and I went and took that class, and I was blown away about how much I didn't know and how much I learned. So I highly recommend that. So what forms are you going to have to get in place? Well, one of the things you're going to need is an advanced healthcare directive. And next Wednesday, a week from tonight, from 6 to 7:30, we are having a course on the Advanced Healthcare Directive. The Advanced Healthcare Directive is what are the things that you want and do not want at end of life? What are the things you want in the hospital? Do you want tubes? Do you want breathing apparatus? Do you want IVs? Or what things do you not want? It also includes your healthcare proxy. And the healthcare proxy is the person who, when you can no longer make decisions, is going to take over and make decisions for you based on what you put in your healthcare part, the advanced directive part, what your desires are. So this is a free class, but you do need to register for it because the room is small. If you can't go this coming Wednesday, we will be repeating it on November 17th, and we do this course quarterly. So everybody sitting in this room needs an advanced directive. It has nothing to do with memory, nothing to do with anything. If you get hit by a bus tomorrow, you want to know, you want somebody who knows what it is that you want when you're in the hospital. Many caregivers cannot get out of the house easily. So I put together this list that's, it's the yellow sheet in your packet. It looks like this. And these are website resources that are websites specifically for caregivers. So the National Institute for Health, AARP, the Family Caregiver Alliance, caregiving.com lists 10 different organizations that you need to know about. So it's really, there's so much information on here. It can be really, really, really helpful. But the one I want you to particularly pay attention to is the very first one, which is the Caregiver, the Conversation Packet Project. What is really challenging when you have a diagnosis of dementia is, how do we start to talk about it? How do we talk to each other? A lot of times there's denial. There's denial from the person who has the dementia. There's denial from other family members who come over and see them maybe for 2 hours, once or twice a week, and they're fine in that 2-hour period, but they're not seeing all the other things. So this is a 15-page download kit of how do we talk about this? How does the family talk about it? How do we all get on the same page with this diagnosis? So it's really a valuable one. But underneath, there's the dementiadirectives.org. I had no idea this existed until I started doing research. And as much as I tell you it's really important to have an advanced directive so that your healthcare proxy knows what you want, this divides up when I have mild cognitive impairment versus moderate versus severe, what are the things I want? Because if I have mild cognitive impairment right now and I get a problem, sick, I might want to go to the hospital. I might want IVs. I might want a breathing tube if it's going to give me a little more time, because this is a minor thing that can be fixed by the medical community. But by the time I get to severe dementia, I might decide I don't want to be transported to the hospital if something happens. I want to stay in my home. I want comfort care. I want to be surrounded by family. So it gives you the option for different phases, and you can fill this out, go to the advanced directive class, and attach it to our medical form so that you've got the legal document attached to what you want in different phases. Okay. You're also going to need legal documents for finance, and that includes things like a durable power of attorney. This is the person who is going to make all your legal decisions. So it's really important that it's someone you very much trust. You're going to want to review and update your will. You're possibly going to want a living trust, and basically you are going to need help. and I mean HELP, Healthcare and Elder Law Programs. HELP has a table out here, and they have all these workshops that are about the legal things in planning end of life. And lucky you, they have a 5-week course coming up at the Redondo Beach Library starting tomorrow from 10:30 to 12:30. It's 5 weeks long. They cover topics like staying in charge of your health care and finances, wills, trusts, and probate, elder care, residential choices, financial planning for long-term care, and senior living medications and awareness. So they're all really important. So if you can go to this, do it, but pick up information for them, because you can call them and they will also sit and talk to you about your specific needs, which is really invaluable information. If you can't make these, they will be coming to the Caregiver Training 1 class, and they'll be giving you kind of a synopsis of the most important things you need to know. Okay, we don't have a lot of time, so did I cover everything? I hope so. Oh, the last thing, the last website on here is the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. And if you go to that website and you plug in your zip code, it will come up with, there are quite a few lawyers who specialize in elder care law in this area. So it's important to get someone who's very familiar with the issues. So as I said, help is out there, but we have many tables here, and all the tables here are people, community resources that are designed to help you as a caregiver. So during the break, please go and talk to these people. Their information is going to help you and make you feel so much better about your role. So I hope I convinced you that as a caregiver, what's your most important job? Taking care of yourself. It's as important as taking care of your loved one, because caregivers tend to isolate. And you need to know that you need to get out, take a class, go to a support group, contact these community agencies, get out, do not isolate. We are all here to support you. Charmone and I are here to support you. David is here to support you. These agencies are here to support you, and Torrance Memorial is here to support you. So please take care of yourself. Don't isolate. Thank you.
So I've been derelict in my duties, and Vicki helped remind me. Because so many of you chose to come out tonight, we were not prepared with the number of handouts. And so there is a list back at the back table that you can sign up for to receive a handout, so that you'll have access to all that information that she's talking about. So our last speaker tonight is Charmone LaRose. She's been in the field of aging since the 1980s. As a gerontologist and memory impairment specialist, she has directed programs for the aging population in adult daycare, assisted living, skilled nursing, and senior centers. In 1990, she began teaching in the older adult program at Torrance Adult School and became the department chair and resource teacher in 1991. For 25 years in this position, she expanded the program in the South Bay community. Part of that expansion was the collaboration with Torrance Memorial's Advantage program in providing health education classes. Since her retirement in 2016 with the Torrance Unified School District, she continues to work as a health educator, teaching classes in caregiving, brain games, and yoga here at Torrance Memorial and in the community. She is part of the Speakers Bureau, a volunteer for the Miracle of Living lecture series, and recently helped found a nonprofit organization, Optimal Life Educational Foundation, that will provide even more educational opportunities for the 55-plus crowd in the South Bay. Please welcome Charmone.
Good evening, everyone. I think about this time you probably need to take a deep breath or maybe stretch up and wiggle your fingers a little. We probably would be moving in another class. Well, I really appreciate your attentiveness. I know this is important information for everyone. Okay, let's see where our little thingy goes next. I think I'm gonna need help moving this. Oh, it's because we're going to talk about brain games and more. And part of the more is really going to be a little bit about why we would want to do brain games. And I know Dr. David Hart talked a little bit about that in terms of how important it is to stay engaged and mentally stimulated. So really all the experts agree on this. It's important for us to use what we have just like we use our muscles to keep ourselves going physically. And this really is ageless. You know, we do things when we're younger, some things we have to shift and change, but it's important to keep ourselves mentally stimulated in a variety of ways. The brain wants something new and novel, so trying things you've never done before is really important. Some people say taking up a musical instrument, or even you're traveling to places you've never seen or never been to, things that are different. Those are really important because it helps us form new neural connections. And this neuroplasticity that has been discovered is the brain will adapt to new things and learn new things. And you know, like if someone has had a stroke or other problem, that the other part of the brain will pick up tasks that would have that were done before. And I just spilled my water. Oh dear. As I talk with my hands. Oh, okay. I think we're okay. But we do want to keep new information coming, whatever that might be. So you want to challenge yourself mentally. It might be that you enjoy doing different things like crossword puzzles. How many like crossword puzzles? A certain amount. Well, you have to keep doing more difficult ones, correct? So that's important in that realm. And it's also important to do a variety of different types of things that are out there. There are a number of books that are out there. I have got a few resources here today, but even if you go to the library, you'll see there are books that have a number of different games that you could do. There's something called this cognitive reserve. And cognitive reserve may account for individual differences in people's susceptibility to even getting an age-related illness. This is something that the research has shown. So how do you build cognitive reserve? Well, they found that people who have been educated or continue to do things that are mentally challenging, even if it's something that's your avocation or some leisure activity you enjoy, that they build up this reserve that helps them as they're moving through time and perhaps wards off some of the illnesses that Dr. David Hart has talked about. So if you don't feel like you have been doing anything like that, don't give up. Start now. Start doing some things that you always said you might like to do. And it's important to do them, and you'll be interacting with other people. That we've talked a little bit about social interaction, but it's a very important part of this whole thing about staying mentally fit. And probably a number of you are, because you're here tonight amongst a number of people, but this is an important component. One of the things I want to say that in the South Bay area, we do have a lot of resources. Vicki has mentioned some here at the hospital, the classes that go on. The Torrance Adult School has classes. We have something called Omnilore, where we have people who are peers educating each other on different topics. Beach Cities Health District has classes. There's a lot of opportunity here, so don't be shy about it. Go. Maybe you'll find somebody else that's interested, and certainly you can have fun in doing these things. So anyway, we build some resilience there by doing some active things mentally. So types of learning, and I would say these types of learning are really types of memory as well. And one is verbal. You know, we rely so much on our verbal abilities and our language skills. But it's the left side of the brain, and we use that. But those are the things that start to not be so easy for us. Like Dr. David Hart mentioned, this whole thing about finding the right word. So those are the first areas that we begin to notice some changes. So what can we do about that? Well, continue to do things that involve your verbal skills. We mentioned the crossword puzzles, but there's all types of things. I know Word Find is out there. I've got scrambled words as part of your brain games, but there are a number of types of games out there. And one of the participants here tonight told me she does a word and makes as many words as she can out of that. All of that, you're working it. And this is helpful. Otherwise, for verbal skills, many times what we do in the class is we start cueing each other, well, that sounds like this, or different words will remind you of different things. So there's ways that you can find different tools that will help us remember things. And the second type of learning or memory skill is visual. Now, visual is very powerful and this stays with us longer. Pictures and the remembrance of pictures and recognizing detail, different shapes and that sort of thing, that lasts with us over time longer. And that usually is a skill we could draw upon to help us in our remembering in different situations. And I'll talk about a little bit more about it, but these are also things that we work with when people are having some difficulties and some, maybe mild, memory impairment. The last thing is kinesthetic memory, movement, routines, physical skills, hands-on activities, which Dr. David Hart did mention how important that was, those routines. And we have what we call the muscle memory, and you learn how to do things by doing them. And we don't forget that. That stays with us long after maybe the verbal skills are starting to diminish. Or you might want to know how to ride a bike or play a musical instrument. That doesn't really go away. You might have to practice a little bit, but those are things that we stay with us. And all of these things are important for our overall learning skills and memory. So with mild cognitive impairment, and Dr. David Hart mentioned this, that would be something you would be diagnosed through your physician or a neurologist. And those people, it's shown that they will have increased cognitive abilities in a number of areas, including attention, processing speed, and short-term memory. If they do different games, they do see improvement in that. And I know there's a statistic out there that if you have been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, you may or may not have Alzheimer's or disease related to that later. But they have shown that there's improvement if you begin to work these different games and skills in a variety of things, really, that include visual games as well. So those are some of the things that we want to keep in mind. And I think I want to emphasize, don't get comfortable with what you're doing. It can be relaxing to do the certain games that you enjoy doing, like the Word Find, but challenge yourself. And I think when you get in a group of people and begin to work with other people, then it becomes more fun, so you don't take it maybe seriously, and it can be something that you just enjoy doing. So here's some resources that I mentioned earlier. There's actually a group of books called Brain Games, and I have picked up a number of those at Barnes & Noble, so that's one. That's, once again, the variety of games. I mean, you can pick some of those books up or magazines, even at CVS or some of the other places. I've even seen word finds and crossword puzzles over at the Dollar Tree, which I visit about 2 times a week. So it's right around the corner. It's very convenient. So there's a number of things out there. And I have mentioned this book here because I find it an excellent book, especially for people. She's written that for people who have mild cognitive impairment. But some of us might begin there, and it's increasing more difficult tasks that are in there, so it helps people. And you want to be able to feel like you can do it, right? But then you will be wanting to challenge yourself as well as you move along. And I put up there the where you can get a hold of that book. Usually Amazon has things as well. I also wanted to mention the Alive Inside video that uses music to reach people. If you haven't seen this, you can get it at the library. Please see it, because it mentions how important music is. And music has always been used in therapy in helping people with cognitive decline, and it's used with people in stroke rehabilitation. You know, many times people can respond if something is sung to them, or the music memory that we have stays with us for so long. And this is a beautiful video about how they have used this in nursing homes to reach people who have severe problems, Alzheimer's or another related disorder, and they can really reach them by creating their own music profile. So that's something. Okay, so this is the Brain Games and More class that we teach here, and we do it a couple times of a year. It's about a 5-week class, and I go over different things in here, like long-term memory and short-term memory. So there's exercises and activities that we do within that. We talk about it. There's learning tools and cognitive exercises. We may find out what kind of learning style you have. We also always include stress reduction, because that's so important for us in terms of our own mental health at all ages, for that matter. So we may do some meditation. We do some exercising, accessing the right and left hemispheres of the brain and how important that is. Using both sides of our brain. Hopefully we will be using all of our brain, and just some of the new things that are out there, and kind of exploring what the possibilities are for our own intelligence and use of our brain. Movement, music, and memory, we always do some things with that as well. And of course, we also talk about nutrition and lifestyle options. And nutrition in particularly, there's a lot of research going on in relationship to how we can help ourselves in the area of nutrition. So we always look at cutting edge things and discuss that. And of course, the last day of the class, we have a brain foods and the potluck. Everybody participates, and that's always good. So that's something you could sign up through Advantage. I wanted to let you know that is available to you. Ooh, that was the last one. But now, you don't see up on the slide, when you came in, you were all given some sampling of brain games. And hopefully you have had a pencil or a pen. And now we're going to go over them and see where we are with it. And so the first one, everyone got a green paper? If there's anybody that came in late, you may not have that, but we'll make sure you can get that. But we're going to go over, first of all, the scrambled words. Scrambled words, everyone. And I'm going to call out to you for the first word. What was the first word? Did anyone get that? Vacation, yay. And the second word? Sailing. You can do that in South Bay. The next one? Swim. Okay, swim. The next word on the second line? Sunflower. Somebody got it. Sunflower. Oh, drat, right? Sunflower. What about the next one? Ice cream. And the last one? Concerts. Oh, yeah, right. And that's what it is when you're working these different games. Oh, drat it. I should have got that. But the more you do these, the better you get. And that is a fact. I've seen that in so many groups. Now, the next ones, I will have to say, these are samples that I usually do more towards the end of the class after you've been in there a while. So the whole idea, that first sample was 26 equals letters in the alphabet. What's the next one? Okay, 52 cards in a deck of cards. Number 2? Somebody said it over here. 9 players on a baseball team. Oh, that'll be a new one. Number 3. What's the number 3? 3 sides on a triangle. Oh, how about number 4? I have two words there, 4, but it's really 7. No? Anybody 7? Seas in the world. 7 seas in the world. Oh boy. How about number 5? 24 hours in a day. Whew. That's the next one. Number 6? 88 equals black and white keys on a piano. You piano players out there knew that. Number 7. 50 states in the Union. Number 8. 22 players on the football field, all you football fans out there. Number 9. Who said that? 5 wheels on a car. Anybody else get that? Yes, because it's tricky. It includes the steering wheel. I saw a few hands out there. Yeah, I know. See, I'm sorry. In my class, you would be getting prizes for this, like chocolate. Absolutely. Number 10. 5 equals fingers on the human hand. Oh, I know it's easy, but it was hard. 11, 4. Anyone get this one? Strings on a violin. And number 12 is 13. Red and white stripes on the American flag. Yay! Did anybody get 100%? Oh, I'll bet you came close. Okay, well, let's go on the other side then. Those are the picture words, so we've got a little combination of visual and verbal here. So on the left, and if you were in my class before, brain games, please don't answer these, because I know that you know them. So the first one is Mary's father has 5 daughters. Nana, Nene, Nini, Nunu. Who is the 5th daughter? Mary. You're all too smart. Okay, Mary is the 5th daughter. If you first read it, you might get fooled. On the one across from that, a woman has 2 sons who were born in the same hour of the same day in the same year. They're not twins. How can this be? Somebody says they're adopted. Different months. Who said that? That's right, they're triplets. How come there's not 2 answers? Okay, so now listen. The next 2 have 2 answers apiece. So the one here, find the odd one out. What's the odd one out on that hazel brown? Temple. Temple is the odd one out. That was right. And why is that? Because? Okay. Well, what?
Hazel is the odd one out.
And why is that?
They're all universities.
They're all universities. So if you had that, you either had Temple, because they're all colors, or Hazel, because the rest are universities. How many had the university one? Okay. Paying attention here. All right. So how about the one to the side? Find the odd one out. What do you got there? Swim is the odd one out. Right? Because the rest are animals. But there's a second answer. Yes, there is. Can anybody tell me if they got a second answer? Who said that? You're right. Rhino, because the rest are dances. Don't you remember the swim and the look? But only a couple. Okay, maybe we're talking about different decades, right? Oh my gosh. Oh dear. Okay, so the next one's kind of straightforward in their assessment of mental skills here. what am I trying to say, math. So what is the answer for that one? Did you figure that one out? All right, all you Sharpies, it's 4,100. All right, now we're at the bottom and we're almost finished here. So we've got the words at the bottom. What the word to the left is? What is the words on the bottom though? It says address. What is that? Does anyone have that? Was that a stumper? Okay, so it's actually address change. See how that changes? The darkness and the lightness. I guess that was tricky. How about number 2? Nothing doing. And number 3. Halfway point. Halfway point. Number 4. An old burr under the saddle. I know, it's not that common. Number 5. Even Steven. And the last one, number 6. Oh boy, we got a couple answers. Well, it actually was stop to think, which is probably a good note to end on. So anyway, thank you everyone.
All right, so we're kind of well into the evening here. We do need to take a break so you can get up and stretch. We are also going to collect questions for the panel. We ask that you write the questions down. Different members of the committee will be picking those up, and then we will direct those questions to the panel. Let's take about 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll reconvene so that we have time for questions. All right. Can you address a genetic component to memory loss?
Yes. So there is a genetic component to memory loss. There are genes that predispose us, right? And those genes, you've probably heard about the APOE4 gene. It's a genetic mutation that increases risk for developing the Alzheimer's type of dementia. Just to put this into perspective, the APOE4 gene increases risk, depending on what you read, between 35 and 50%. Okay? If you look at type 2 diabetics, increases risk 75 to 90%, right? So what we know, obesity, same thing, cardiovascular disease. I think people are concerned that they might have the gene, and so what do you do about it? I think that the response is the same for everybody. Do these or adopt these lifestyle strategies that would help to prevent it in the first place, like diet, exercise, social connectivity, cognitive fitness, etc. Where do you get the test for the gene? This is something bioethically that I think we all have to be very careful about. And I'm just going to say this as a cautionary tale and something for you to consider. Of course, you all are in charge of your medical decision making. At the same time, what would it be like living in a society in which you had a pre-existing condition, including the gene that might increase your risk for developing Alzheimer's? And then you were unable to be insured because you had this pre-existing condition, or you were unable to get life insurance or long-term care insurance. Be careful, I think, and talk in depth with your medical practitioners, your clergy, people that you trust, as you begin to consider whether or not you get the genetic test. In addition to that, there's no treatment. So you'll know, but there's nothing that you can do except to adopt the strategies that we've talked about tonight.
And I just want to caution everyone, we're just kind of in the birth of genetics, and genetics is going to be involved in a lot of things. Genetics is going to start to drive which drugs we as physicians choose. But because we know so little, we still don't have any idea where the more we learn about genetics, the way it will affect what we think we already know. For example, if I say BRCA to you guys, almost everybody in the audience will think about cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer. Are you aware that BRCA only causes 6% of breast cancers? We suspect that 30% of breast cancer is genetic. We just haven't named the genes. So the more we learn about this, will we learn that maybe APOE or anything else that we think we know, we'll find out that, well, we didn't quite have it figured out. And so a lot of times people that I counsel on breast cancer will want to be tested for BRCA, and that's fine. It's just, it doesn't tell you that it's still not a genetic disease because we don't know where the 30% comes from. So just take it with a grain of salt and realize we never know as much as we think we know. All right, David Hart said there's a drug in phase 2 testing that dissolves the beta amyloid in a brain. Could that drug be used as a vaccine to prevent the disease in the first place?
Yes, that's what they're hoping for, right? They're looking for a prophylactic. So they're looking at a map of risk factors. So individuals who have a family history, women, diabetics, patients with cardiovascular challenges, et cetera. These are the individuals, hopefully, that may in the future receive a prophylactic to stop the amyloid plaque from building before it damages the structure of the brain. So that's what they're hoping to do. And there's been a lot of clinical trials. Salzanuzumab was the vaccine that was tested a few years ago that didn't do so well in phase 3 of clinical trial. And now this new vaccine is moving into phase 3 shortly. But again, phase 3 is the phase where we start to generalize the information. So they have to test it on thousands upon thousands of people, which takes a long time. I think there's reason to be cautiously optimistic. The conferences and researchers that I learn from and hear from tend to sort of, there's something to be hopeful about, but again, cautiously hopeful because we're not quite there yet to celebrate. We're not at the finish line yet.
And that's one thing that scares most of us about this disease is you can know all that you want to know about it, but if there's nothing that can be done, it is frustrating. So sometimes one breakthrough is what will beget the next several breakthroughs. So if we can just get that one breakthrough, it might really open the doors. All right.
Can I say something
Yes.
really quick? I had a client several years ago who was in my memory club, which is a club for patients in the early stages. We run it at Beach Cities Health District. But this patient, he was in World War II. He was a medic in World War II. And he will never forget the day that polio was cured. And that he was, working wherever he was in Germany, and he heard it over the loudspeakers, and just like that, the snap of somebody's fingers, it was cured, and it changed the world forever. So there's always something to be hopeful for.
That is an excellent point. Now this, I think, is a very common thing, and I imagine each of you might have something to add for this. How do I get my aunt to be diagnosed for dementia when she refuses to go to the doctor and cancels all the appointments made for her?
I think we're all going to answer a little bit of this. So it's a communication problem for one thing to try to convince her. And there might be a little bit of not truth telling and how you're going to get her there, little maneuvers and manipulating or touching that. And I'm going to turn it over to Vicki now because she does the caregiver support.
Yeah, this kind of issue comes up frequently where the person knows that there's a problem. And I usually tell them if they can get them, it's the truth-telling thing. Like, we're going in for a physical, but they need to get to the doctor ahead of time and just say, these are the things that are going on, and I need more thorough testing so that the doctor knows that, because they can't say anything there.
Is it teddy bear time?
It's a teddy bear time, right? You know, any time that a patient exhibits resistance to care, you've got to ask, you know, what's causing the resistance? I'm always asking clients, you know, what have you done in the past that's worked, right? And so exploring, sometimes we need more data to help to determine a solution. So I'm going to ask what's worked in the past when you've experienced resistance. What have you done that has helped facilitate movement? And then I'm going to start thinking about solutions. What if we can find a physician, and there are several in the South Bay, that does home visits, right? So rather than trying to get the patient out of the home, have a physician come and visit with him or her in the home. In addition to that, I think it's really important that you all know, and here's the barometer that I use with caregivers. You have two primary responsibilities. One is the safety of your loved one. Safety. Their physical safety, their psychological safety, their financial safety, that they don't neglect themselves, and their sexual safety. That's your primary responsibility. Second to that, as important, but second to that in tandem, is your own sanity, right? So oftentimes what I find is caregivers are, you know, hitting their head up against the wall trying to get something to happen when their loved one is actually safe, right? That sometimes it's not important to know what type of dementia the patient has. Sometimes it's just, oh yeah, has dementia, right? And now it's a quality of life issue for that patient and for you. So is it the most important thing that they get a thorough diagnostic evaluation? It's important, but not the most important. You have to balance it with your own sanity. So there is a time, and I think this is hard for us to recognize, where our loved ones are transitioning. And sometimes we have to sort of go meet them where they are, right? Meet them where they are. As long as they're safe. Safety most important. That's my response. I don't know how good it was, but there you go.
And I think Dr. Hart is exactly right, because I deal with family members all the time that are frustrated. They know they want to do something and they want maybe the physician to intervene. And I kind of have to take the same stance that, well, there's this we could do and this we could do, but sometimes things have to play out. They have to evolve to the point where now it's a good, it's pretty clear and evident that we can go in.
Yeah, it's a quality of life issue. I'll tell you, just to give you an example, I had a client recently who absolutely refused to take her medications, just would not do it. And I asked the family, well, how do you get her to do stuff when she doesn't want to do things? And you know who they use? She respects her physician. So anytime the physician says something, she does it. So now this is complicated, right? Because she's at home not wanting to take her medications, and the physician is at the office. So what did we decide to do? What was our solution? We recorded a video from the physician on the phone with the physician saying, hello, so-and-so, it's time to take your meds. And did it work? It worked for a couple of days.
All right. So all the services that were talked about tonight, how many of these services are free? What are some of the costs?
A lot of the services are free. The support group, it's free the first time. It's $2 a night if you can afford that. If you can't, it's fine. David's Essentials class is free. His support group is free. Memory Club is free, yes? Memory Club is free. The Caregiver Training 1 is $55 for the 6 weeks. And the Advanced Healthcare Directive is free. What else did I talk about? Did I talk about Oh, brain games is, I think it's 50 for the, yeah.
Yeah, and Vicki probably mentioned it, but if you're an Advantage member and it's free to sign up for Advantage, that you get discounts on all of the classes if they do have a fee. And if you happen to belong to THIPA, you even get a further discount.
And sometimes I feel like I get overwhelmed about all the services that you have out there. So sometimes just dive in and do one. And then you will start to get a feel, well, you know what, I'm pretty comfortable with this. Maybe this is the next thing that I need to try. Don't feel like you have to do them all. All right, now this I think is a very good, important point that I would like all of you to address. This was just said as a story, and on the side they wrote beware. So this was the story, but I think it's important for us to remember how easily people with dementia can be taken advantage of if somebody's not watching out for them. This is what a person told me about had happened to her. She was a sole caregiver for her father and later for her mother. After the parents had passed away, she got a phone call. It was a woman on the line saying that this caregiver owned a home of care group and they owed hundreds of dollars for the care of the parents. This had never been the case since she had been the only sole caregiver. So why don't you speak just a little bit to that patients with dementia can be targeted so easily.
Yeah, I hear stories all the time about about loved ones being taken care of. I'm currently working with several clients whose loved ones are being scammed upon by, boyfriends. Mm-hmm. Boyfriends who come into the picture and, unduly influence patients who have severe cognitive impairment, even mild cognitive impairment. Judgment sometimes is just not intact, right? Making good decisions about who I trust and who I don't. And when, a individual is receiving a lot of praise and receiving a lot of affection and receiving a lot of joy from a person who knows how to be manipulative, it's quite easy to convince that person with cognitive impairment to change the power of attorney, to change the trust, to change the trustees, to buy things that are unnecessary. It is a significant issue and a scary one. Know this, if I can tell you anything, what I've learned in the last 3 years around this issue, is the law is very complicated. It's very, very complicated, and it is geared to protect the individual's right to make their own choices, even if they're impaired. To be deemed incompetent is a legal matter, and that to have that happen in a court of law is a big uphill push. So just be sure that when you set up your estate and you set up your financial and healthcare documents, that you pick the people that are going to fight for you, that are going to fight as hard as they can ever fight in their life. Pick those people, because it happens more often than you think.
Yeah, if I can chime in on this, I was incredibly blessed when my mother had her stroke. My sister and I were in total agreement about all my mother's money went to her care. We weren't looking for an inheritance. I thought that's the way families operate. I have learned it is not how families operate. I cannot tell you, I thought about putting this in my presentation, but I didn't want to bum you out any more than we already have tonight. I can't tell you the number of people who've come in where the caregiver has been caring for their mother, their loved one, whoever, for years, and often not taking any money or anything, and suddenly the siblings come in and they cut them off. They cut off their funds, and they say that you've manipulated our mother because she has Alzheimer's, and they're suing. daughters who've come in and they're just crying. This is my brother. He was my best friend my whole life. And I don't understand it. I don't. But because of that, I really want to encourage you, if there is a diagnosis, or even if there isn't, that you get all of this legal stuff in alignment now. And again, this is something I never would have thought of, but if you can have your doctor actually sign a document that at this stage, when all this legal stuff is happening, you are of sound mind. Because people will come back and try to say, no, she already had dementia and you talked her into doing all these things. So, and if you don't have anybody in your family you can trust, there are legal fiduciaries who will, you can hire to take care of all of that. So it's really important, and it's more distressing than I'd like to admit.
I'll add to that. Yes, and the other thing I do want to say that our group from HELP, that they address this as well. And Artis has come and done a whole presentation on scams in the Caregiver 2 class. And it's one of the things that she sees a lot in their work. And the law, as David says, is there's a lot of entanglement within that. But you want to be as informed as you can. And the HELP organization does help with that in their lectures. And they have some answers that might be valuable to you as well.
So I think we've had a very, very good evening tonight. I'd like to have one more time that we thank our panel, and hopefully we'll go home with lots of food for thought.